Hi, my name is Shilpa Vijaykrishnan, and I head the Education and Outreach Programming at the Museum of Art and Photography. On behalf of MAP and the BIC, I'm pleased to welcome you all to today's session for the love of food, which forms the last in a series of talks themed around living traditions. Over the last year and a half, our circumstances have generated a need in all of us, I think, to create a little magic in our own homes. And during the times of into things that comfort us and remind us of what's important. This is somewhat always intrinsically linked to food, the people we love, and our ideas of home. So food is a reflection of our identity, a way of communicating from one generation to the next, a connection to others, to forms of storytelling, both intimate and cultural. But the identities and relationship that we have with food is not only a marker of shared histories and nostalgia, but also can be complicated, incomplete, and fraught with history. So today we have with us Anumitra Ghosh, Srishtaa Aparna Pallavi, and Suresh Jayaram in conversation, exploring some of these ideas of culinary practices, archiving, and sharing. Anyone who has met Suresh Jayaram probably knows how passionate he is about food. An artist, art historian, and curator. He's the founder director of One Shanti Road Studio in Bangalore. And this space is the one that was recently mapped through food, recipes, and people in the publication, The One Shanti Road Cookbook. Joining him today is Anumitra Ghosh Dastidar, a professional chef and co-founder of the Edible Archives, a restaurant and art research project that's based in Goa. She has also been working with indigenous ingredients and in particular different varieties of indigenous rice for many years. Our third speaker today is Srishtaa Aparna Pallavi, a former journalist. She spent over 2 years researching indigenous food through over 11 states in the country and learning, among other things, about the food culture that surrounds the Mawa flower. So thank you all three for giving us your time today. And thanks to Keshavan from Signable for interpreting today's event. The full bios for all the three speakers will be available in the chat box. And any questions that you have for any of them can be posted using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So now I'm just going to hand over to you, Suresh. The plate is all yours.
Thank you, Shilpa. Thank you, MAP and BIC. I'm very happy to speak to these two fascinating women, Aparna and Anumitra, who will narrate their experiences with food cultures, living traditions, authenticity, and archiving food. So I would love to have Anumitra to present her PowerPoint, and after that we'll have Aparna. Anumitra, will you take over?
Yes. Hello, I'm Anumitra. I run a restaurant in Goa, but that's one front of our work. The other thing that we do is that we talk about like almost like storytellers. We are trying to also understand and tell stories about our ingredients, which are mundane around us, and like all in our the photos you will see also in the food. I have not kept any PowerPoint with any writing. It's all the kind of food that we do. Through the visual and through some of the questions answering in the PowerPoint, I think I'll be able to tell about the kind of food culture that we are trying to represent. Will you change the slide? And yeah, so I'll just start with this question of memorable experience of food. So this is about 5 years ago. I was working in Bangkok with Chef Kong, and he used to come up with very interesting questions sometimes and just throw it on me. I was also working with in a kitchen where only him and me, we spoke in English. Everybody else used to speak in Thai. So all my learning was very tactile and, like touching, seeing and all that. And so I was very, very focused on the rigor of learning all the things there. One day he gave me 3 coconuts, like tender coconuts, and said that, like, tell me which one is from the sea, near the sea area, one from a canal area, and one from a one from a near a river. Tell me which coconut is what. Like, that was, I was ready for all kinds of complicated cooking related question. That told me, like, I have to really, like, only rely on my senses to answer this. And like, I could say that which one from near the sea because of the saltiness, but I was not right about the canal and the river thing. But this exercise made me think that most of the time in cooking, especially in professional kitchen, we are mostly very particular about the rigor and the practice. But food is also very sensual. So I started thinking about, like, food in a very sensual way, and engaging food in us, like, through senses. I got completely obsessed with this whole practice. And I was, around that time, I used to also, I have worked with a lot of people in Japan and in Italy and all that. So I used to also come up with this. I used to see chefs being completely obsessed with this idea that, oh, this particular cheese is coming from Sardinia, and the specialty of it is, it's a sheep pecorino. And but I was mostly, looking outward to look for my ingredients. And this is the turning point where I started thinking that I want to look at my own ingredients, which is around me, and tell the story of those things. And also I realized that I'm good at understanding the ingredients itself. Can you change the slide? So I came up with this whole proposal called Edible Archives for Kochi Biennale, where we said that we want to, there are post 1960s, when a lot of the indigenous rice was getting, like, it was all endangered. Like, some of them are endangered, some of them the reduction of the production was happening a lot. And so we said that our everybody has an edible archives in their mind and their body. And from this time onwards, that the collective edible archives of India, it's reducing when it comes to the indigenous ingredients. It's maybe expanding in another way, that a lot more people are aware of, say, pizza, or a lot more people are aware of nori. But like, with different rice and all, people are, it's shrinking, that edible archive. So our whole project was to make a collective edible archives, where you have the entrance, you end, like, of all these things that you eat, it has an entry in your own edible archive. So that's how the whole concept of edible archives started. And we made it a point that it's a ingredient driven experience than a cuisine driven experience. Can you change the slide? So the next thing, like, after Kochi, we did was in Paris. We did another program, like another event of edible archives, where we did. It's called Kaziranga Express, but we were doing food which is like from the Eastern India. But that's the main story of that pop-up. But there was another parallel story happening, which is that we took all these 9 varieties of indigenous rice, which are all rain-fed rice. And with parallelly with that thing, we started talking to people about each of this rice. This next slide. And this is the food we were doing, but every day the rice used to change, and that became like a point of storytelling and telling people. So we and there were people who came to us and told us that, oh, the best thing I liked in the whole thing was the rice. And I was not feeling insulted at all as a chef. I just felt that I could communicate my story to them. Next slide. So when it comes to authenticity, when I started cooking, I was very obsessed with the sense of authentic, like very, very obsessed. And I'm still like when it comes to learning, I'm very obsessed with learning the authentic recipe in whatever authenticity means. But I have realized that authenticity is like it's learn like a language or a grammar. Like if I start like say with a particular recipe, as you do more, as you eat more, you develop a essence of that thing, and like that particular recipe, and it you have to spend time with that ingredient or with the recipe, or you have to eat it several times, but then you develop a sense of that thing. It's also and after you have the essence with you, then you can actually expand little bit, or but not in like it can't be ungrammatical. It's like also like Hindustani music. If you are learning, so your teacher might be teaching you bandish, but then as you practice and practice, then you can come up with an interpretation which will not be exactly replicating your teacher's bandish. So I feel that my kind of understanding of authenticity is like that. So the photo here I'm showing, we did it in Kochi Biennale again, and it's basically I used to live in Delhi for 10 years. So, also in Rajouri Garden in heart of like Punjabi area, and I have learned making rajma. So this dish is actually a black rice which is from Bengal called kala bhat, cooked with a rajma cream and served with kurkure bhindi. So this is a very typical Delhi this thing, that rajma chawal and kurkure bhindi. But I also learned how to do risotto. So the cooking of the rice and how you melt, like how you put the white butter into it, it is like somewhere the image of the risotto also played a role. But I still think that when you eat it, the authenticity of the rajma and kurkure bhindi is still there. Can you change? So another kind of authenticity I want to talk about is that that sometimes authenticity also is like authenticity is dependent on a context. Like here on the right hand side of this photo, you see a dish where it's mustard prawn with the white thing is the sannas from Goa. So both the dish are very, very authentic in its actual nature. But like when you put them together, there is like that is our, I think, the creative this thing, because the tanginess of the sanna and the sweetness of the sanna and goes very well with the pungency of the prawn, and again there is a sweet tone of the prawn. So I feel that these two things, they are extremely authentic in their cooking. In fact, the sannas that we make, it's like it's not something that I make. My one of the person who works with me, her mother, who is from the community, she makes it, and we try to like she used the actual toddy and she makes it for us. So I think this is also like another way of presenting authenticity. Can you change? Yeah. So this is another example that once a few years ago, I was working on a project called Steamed, Smoked, and Tempered, which is like, so it was a University of Chicago Delhi Center was doing this project. So I worked with like 4 different restaurants to understand like all the different kinds of food, but then curated it in like I was not even cooking, because I was not even confident to cook say a Naga dish and just do it in my way. I was so like stressed about it that I was working with chefs. But what I did was that changing the proportion of like akhune, if a whole dish is of akhune, then a person who is from another community, the way they react to that, it is very difficult to convey that, because like I have also seen it at home right now, when my mother cooks in a meal, four dishes are there, three of them are with mustard oil and the fourth one is rice. And I also feel that it's like all the pungency, like if I change one dish on one mustard oil from one dish, I still think that the authenticity of the meal is conveyed. Like also we have, like for last couple of years, we are in conversation with this place called Buddha folklore in North Karnataka, where I have seen that they what they do is that they work with four tribal communities there, and they sometimes do cooking workshops and food related workshops where uh, there are a lot of people who are coming from the community and some people who are from outside. And what happens is that everybody learns few skills together. So the skill, in one hand it stays with the community also, but also some other people learn it. And like I was also part of it, so as a chef it's very difficult for me to say that to be complete authentic and this thing, because how, like you, the authenticity is also like if you are working with one community specific thing, then the authenticity exists in some way. And when you are working in a multi-community space, it also happens in another way. So I think that uh, it's a complex thing that we have to deal with in our everyday uh, like practice. And, or is it the last? About the last question, what is like, how we want to archive as edible archives, that we are, that we, first of all, that we know that the food, if it is, it has to be archived, it has to be through experience, through eating. It can't be that you read, like you do a Wikipedia entry and read something and that becomes your edible archives. I strictly believe that it has to be an experiential thing. So that's why we try to tell stories about ingredients and archive it in the memory of the person who is eating. And so that is the major like shift of archiving that we generally talk about. Other than that, we also do write about these things, and photographic this thing we do to our Instagram or something, just to also have this discourse on. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Anumitra. And hi, Aparna.
Hi.
Can you hear
Aparna,
me?
Srishtaa.
Yeah. So we would like you to give us your presentation.
Suresh, can you please call me Srishtaa?
I can't hear you.
Oh.
Shishta, okay.
Now. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Shrishta. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I
We've lost Shishta.
Yeah, I'm afraid Shrishta has dropped off. So perhaps Suresh and Anumitra, if you want to just pick this up until she's able to rejoin us, we'll try and work that out.
Okay.
Sure.
Anumitra, there are some questions about uh, who was a big influence in your life?
Like it's life or like in my chef life?
Yeah, in your chef life, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are many influences, and most of them are actually not chefs. Most of them are like where I have eaten some food which I cannot forget. Like I remember once I was working with the Rajbangshi community near Bhutan Bengal border, and there I had this rice which was Kalonunia rice with pigeon meat, and that is like something like a very humble farmer. Like they were very excited and they wanted to feed me something very special, and that experience I can't forget. Or one more experience is like all these kind of anecdotes that I have to tell. Like of course Chef Kong is a very big influencer in my life. uh, like if chef influence, I will say of course Ritu Dalmia I worked with. She was a very big influence in my life. Then my the first person who I got trained, Tamura San. Tamura San was a big influence in my life. But the experiences, the food experience wise, I think that that story that I was telling you, or something uh, like I started Edible Archives also with a small story that once my one of my uncle who was building a house, he wanted to buy brick from some like a place near Bishnupur where a community was living, which a Bihari community, and also like Bengalis around that area. So we reached there at night, and they didn't have anything much, so they made rice and greens, and we were fishing all through on our way. So we had a mixed batch of fish, so they fried everything. And they did a very interesting thing where, because there was nothing much to feed, so they said they gave us some dried some raw garlic and some fried chili and salt, and said that mash it with the rice and have all with all this. And that's like even I'm getting a goosebump with that, like that experience. So I have many experience which are like that, which actually are the major influences in my life as a chef, like where mm, uh, I got inspirations.
Thank you. I think we've got Shishta online, and I think she can do a presentation if she's ready.
Yeah, Shishta, can we just check your voice, please?
Yeah, I can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear. Yeah, we're just bringing up
Yeah,
your
but
presentation.
I can't see my presentation. Yeah, I can see it now. Yes. So Anumitra answered quite a few questions in her presentation, but I was not aware that we had to answer those questions in the presentation. I thought they were for the discussion later.
No,
So
we
my
will.
presentation is just an introduction of my work. Yeah, can you change the slide? Hello, can someone change the slide? Yeah. So this first picture is of Mahua flowers. These are kind of infamous mostly among the common public as something you make liquor out of. Even when we were preparing for this talk, Suresh asked me, the moment I mentioned Mahua, Suresh asked me it's used to make liquor, right? But it's not known that Mahua is a food actually. It used to be a food. It is also used to make liquor, but used to be a staple with the people of the Adivasi communities in central India. During my journalist, I was in just specializing in environment. And during my with Adivasis, because my specialization was also forests and forest rights and all those areas, I found out about this food. And over a period of some years, I started hearing that this food is eaten all over the central tribal belt. and it used to be a staple. Can you switch the slide? Yeah, so this is how the fresh mahua flower looks like. And these flowers then shed. Once they have fully bloomed, the whole flower, the whole white thing you're seeing there, it just slips off the plant and it falls on the ground. And that is when Adivasis collect it. Can you change the slide? Yeah, this is a close-up of the flower. And next slide. Yeah, this is an Adivasi woman collecting these flowers. What Adivasis do is during most of India, the season is from roughly March, mid-March to mid-April. In Tamil Nadu, I have found that the season is a little different. It is from mid-May to mid-June. So whenever this season is, Adivasis just collect this flower, they dry it, and they dry it out real good. They say for 5 days till there is very little moisture. And then this flowers are stored in the houses. I have seen in many parts of India, Adivasis store as much as 4 or 5 quintals in their house for eating throughout the rainy season. During the rainy season, this food is, next slide, it is recognized as something warm and something good for the body. And modern research, scientific, yeah, this is the storage containers in which Adivasis stored their mahua to protect it from moisture. And it is eaten throughout the monsoon and the winter months as a staple in place of it. I mean, people fill their bellies with mahua rather than with any kind of grain. You know? So I learned about this food from Adivasis, and I also found that there was a lot of misconception around this food. And the entire time I was an environment journalist, I was also writing about indigenous food, indigenous cultivation, their food travels. There was in Down magazine, there was a food pod for which contributed a lot, but I could never write on mahua because of certain policies. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so I could never, as I said, write on mahua because I mean, because there are many policies. There's one article, but I realized that it had huge potential because it was eaten almost all over India in one form or the other. So when I left my job with Down to Earth magazine, I decided to do a project. So for 3 years, I traveled all parts of India. I covered total of 11 states. And this journey was totally in spirit of gift. I had no funds, I had no sponsorship. I lived and ate with people, and I traveled very, very cheap on whatever little funds I had. So that is when I started learning about mahua and the food culture around it and why it was appearing and why people liked it and why they stopped liking it. So this picture that you're seeing is one of the ways in which mahua is cooked. It is being roasted. So there are two basic ways to cook mahua. One is roasting and one is boiling. And this is the first roasting picture. So next slide. Hello, can someone change the slide? Yeah. So this is the roasted mahua, the same woman who was roasting it. I mean, and this is just one form of roasting mahua. Next slide. Hello, next slide, please. Yeah, and then this is the same roasted mahua being pounded into a powder. And next slide. Next slide, please. So these are some of the dishes. Actually, totally, I collected something like 35 different dishes with mahua. So this is a dish called kudmul. It is a stuffed puri from mahua from Telangana. Then next slide. Yeah, this is one lady from UP, from Chitrakoot, this lady called Ramkali Amma. She is showing 3 different dishes made from mahua. This lady taught me 7 dishes in all. But this was the best picture of her holding mahua ka gulgula. This is the thing at the bottom is mahua ka, what is it called? Malpua, and the top thing is mahua ka roti. Next slide. And this is a total of 7 dishes from Patalkot in MP. There, because the Bharia Adivasis are pretty isolated, their food practices are still very alive, old food practices. So they have lots and lots of ways of, eating mahua. So they taught me 7 dishes. Yeah, next. Next slide, please. Yeah, and these are some of the women. So I used to actually sit with women and say, please show me how to cook things. And because mahua is a totally unfamiliar ingredient and its cooking styles are so different from our regular cooking that I had to really sit with them and watch every little thing very closely, how they were cooking, how they were making it. So these are Bharia Adivasi women. And I don't remember what exactly they are making here, but as I said, they showed me 7. Yeah, next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I also started holding workshops to teach Adivasis or to help them basically revive their pride in this food and their what should I say, their food practices. And I was noticing that each area usually had 2 or 3 dishes and people got tired of eating it because their food habits were also changing. So I tried to give workshops for rural people and provide them all the dishes that I knew because I had been collecting so many dishes so people could use mahua more. And also to kind of generate awareness that it was a really nutritious food, very rich in iron, very rich in calcium, and traditionally known to be very, very healthy. So, as part of that awareness thing that I was doing, I also held workshops. And yeah, maybe the last slide now. And these are urban workshops which I did in order to bring some awareness of mahua as a food among urban population. And my idea at that time was that if I could give people some information about this food, then maybe it would be valued more and the notoriety of mahua as a liquor thing could come down. The Adivasis might start taking more interest in their own food, taking pride in their food instead of being, ashamed or suppressed about it. And of course, my journey had to stop because of health reasons. And since then, I've not been able to work much. But now I'm looking to write I'm working on my book on the subject, which will be out in maybe a year or so. And apart from that, I'm also planning certain very focused projects to kind of revive this food and or create models of revival for this really precious and disappearing food. So yeah, I think this is enough. Now we can remove this. And okay, now I'll start my video and see. Yeah, my work, and now I'm kind of open to the discussion.
We just want you to describe how Mawa tastes and what is maybe a unique recipe that you have tasted or made with Mawa flowers.
Recipe, the thing is, from the point of view of the urban food eater, food consumer, Mahua is unique because the cooking techniques, all the kind that are not familiar with us, for us. Like it is a very soft little flour, but many Adivasis boil it for 10 hours at each time, before eating it. And there are reasons behind it. Or when they roast it, there are something like 5 or 6 different techniques for roasting it and different extents to which it is roasted for different dishes. So I would say most Mahua dishes would be unique from the point of view of the food which we are used to eating. They are nothing like. And when it comes to the taste, I remember a really funny incident. I was in Jharkhand near Ranchi, and in a village where some women were showing me a dish with mahua. And of course, the food tradition had died down. The women just remembered having eaten it, remembered having cooking. And there were these little two boys sitting next to us and watching what was going on. And these boys were like, okay, what are you going to do with this? Why are you making this? So this is a food. And this is your food, your community's food. And so what they did was they just picked up one raw mahua and ate it. And the reaction that came from the boy was so priceless. He said, "Arey baap re, bahut dher sara meetha hai." So mahua, when it is raw, I mean the dry flour or even the fresh flour, very, very, very sweet with a slight bitter aftertaste, which is an interesting flavor, and it may be a little challenging to get used to at first. It has to grow on you if you are not really familiar with it. So that is how mahua tastes. And contrary to what a lot of you ask me, just eating the mahua won't get you intoxicated. It has to be
I mean, we know that Anumitra is focusing on certain kinds of food, especially rice from the Northeast, and also ingredients that she's familiar with by staying in Goa and traveling around. And you are focusing on a particular flour which is kind of indigenous and seen in particular areas in India. So, is there anything uh, authentic that you want to represent or want to see that this is something that is very unique, or can it be interpreted in different ways?
Suresh, we've lost Shrishta there. I think you'll have to, she's dropped out. I think if you can continue the conversation with Anumitra.
Okay, Anumitra, I think back to you again. So, what do you think that you have explored this whole idea of different kinds of rice, etc.? And do you really believe in the authenticity of a specific recipe, or do you think that you're you're open to change, open to interpretation, open to experimentation?
I think that authenticity, the way I described before, that for me, like I try to be very authentic in the process of learning a recipe. Then, like I'm very religious about how to actually like do it very authentically, and also it really doesn't come to you, because if you are not familiar with one ingredient or something, you have to constantly do it. It is then only either you eat or you this thing, it can't happen that you see a YouTube video and do that. Also, I believe in that, the passing the knowledge from another person, uh, spending time with that community or that ingredient, like in which is actually almost together it happens, or a recipe, then you like in that case, I think that the I really want to like learn in a very authentic way. And not only for myself, even when I try to I also work with a group of chefs, the training also has to be in that way. We use very like we use like older stone for making this thing. We use grinding stones, this that. So I believe that that has to be like learning can be like that, but there should be also like for a chef, uh, I'm also not communicating only through my food with that community. When you are only uh, uh, communicating with that community, that authenticity can be kept in a certain way, even cooking technique wise. But in a different place, in a different situation, when you are, this is also communication. And I believe that the sustainable way of the sustainability is also about getting more people aware of that, aware of this. So that's why I believe that there should be that kind of changes, like that kind of interpretation, uh, we have, like we do constantly in kitchen. And that is not only chefs, even people from within the community, they are also innovating. That's why it's like language, it's like you have a grammar, but within that you are constantly innovating.
We've got Shishta. Shishta, can you talk about something about recipes of Mawa which are very indigenous? And do you think there is a way of appropriating it, or you want to keep it very authentic?
See, for me, the question of authenticity, because Mahua being kind of a territory of some of the very most vulnerable people in the country, the Adivasis, the question of authenticity also is very closely tied up with the question of ownership. Because when I started Mahua and when I started putting my learning out, I was blogging on Facebook about it, I found that there was a lot of interest in just getting hold of the ingredient and doing experiments with it. I mean, people would write to me, can you send us 1 kilo of mahua? We will experiment to make something. So for me, that is not a very, very healthy way to treat this ingredient, because it has its long culture and it has its, very unique ways of being prepared. As I said, sometimes people boil it for the whole night and then they cook it with all sorts of other ingredients like uh, tamarind seeds, or the seeds of the sal tree, or a certain kind of seed pods that are found in certain forest areas. They cook it with those things. And experimentation is very easy, and experimentation is kind of dime a dozen. There are so many people with money who are wanting to do it. For me, protecting authenticity would also be very, very tied up with protecting ownership. Nothing wrong with experimenting, but I would like people to have the patience to take the journey from the root, from where Adivasis actually do it, actually what the culture is around. I would like the journey to start there. Like there is so much overlap sometimes between the various tribes and how they eat mahua. And at the same time, at times things are so different. Like as I said, that mahua is roasted. And initially I was like, okay, yeah, I know how to roast it because I had learned it at one place. And then, this one incident happened. I was roasting mahua in a broken mud pot during one of my workshops. And I was going like this speed roasting, because that's what I had seen in one day. And the women in the workshop, they started talking and they started saying, no, this is wrong, this is wrong. And then I said, okay, how do you do it? So they said, you have to first reduce the flame and you have to go it like this, slow. You have to really stir it slow. So every region, even the dishes which look very similar are actually very different. And each thing is, there's a question of ownership of that particular tribe. So for me, authenticity would be about really documenting what each tribe or each indigenous community is doing with it. And like you talked about there are several people all over India who make mahua rotis. They mix the mahua with wheat or jawar or what millet flour and make some kind of a roti. But the rotis all over the place are so different. The ones in Rajasthan are steamed. The ones in UP are made with wheat. The ones in central India, MP, Jharkhand, they are made with millets. And then again, there are so many different techniques. So authenticity would mean really mentioning where we are getting that and who has the ownership of that particular technique of making, that particular style. And then there is the other question that Adivasi recipes tend to also be very loose. That they can be very specific in certain things and very, very chill and loose in other things. So somewhere balancing the two, keeping the specificity alive and also taking in view the places where there is overlap or the places where you can let your imagination run. That understanding is very important, rather than just taking an ingredient and you're cooking it how you like.
Thank you. There is a question here for Anumitra from Mr. Lal, who says, Goa is a home to multiple distinctive cuisines and ingredients. Are there any local Goan ingredients that you are particularly interested in?
Yes, there are many, in fact. I'll just tell a couple of them, which we are I'm still working with people to understand. Like one thing we try to use, which is tefla or tefel. So that's a very unique thing. It's a berry kind of a thing, which is like a Szechuan pepper family, but it has the flavor is from the citrus family. So it's basically, it also has a little bit of heat, and that's the quintessential element of Goan fish curry. So that is one very fascinating ingredient. Then definitely I work with kokum, which is another very, very interesting ingredient, which is like from not only Goa, like all the Konkan coast has, and it has many varieties. So actually I was visiting some communities in northern Karnataka where I have encountered like 5-6 varieties of same kokum. And we are still I always say that we are still learning about these ingredients. Then I'm fascinated with the coconut vinegar. So I work with people who are involved with the processing of the coconut vinegar. We don't do it ourselves, but within the community, people who does that, they like we go and observe and taste, and this is just a regular kind of things we do to understand these ingredients better.
Thank you. There's a question for about Mawa, talking about somebody saying that what is the taste of Mawa, and how do you communicate with the women, tribal women, when you go around doing your research?
I just told about it.
Shishta. Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Shrishta,
Yeah,
maybe you can
I
turn
think I
off your
just-
video to preserve bandwidth.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is he asked about the taste of mahua, which I have already said, really very sweet. And that is one reason why people cook it, to bring down its sweetness, make the sweetness into something. And when it comes to communication, most parts of India people do understand Hindi. So I don't have most parts of parts where mahua is available. Then towards the east, I happen to be Bengali. I talk in Bangla and people get it in Jharkhand, Bengal, that area. And in the south, I usually have an interpreter with whom to communicate. And since I have been writing and interacting with Adivasis for my whole career, almost 25 years. So there are certain things about Adivasis which I have been aware of right from the beginning, like how they would refer to certain things. Like if I ask them, how do you cook a certain thing? I know not to expect a very, detailed recipe. If they say, they may say just something offhand. Sometimes they'll say it's like खट्टा डाल के बना लेते हैं, और जैसे सब instead of overwhelming them with very urban questions, I've over time developed skills of how to ask and what to ask, how to do it so that they are not overwhelmed. So that's some of the things I do to communicate.
There's another question for you, Anumitra, which says that I wonder how you deal with ideas of authenticity while also keeping in mind that you might be perpetuating food practices and traditions that are inherently exclusionary, especially because caste and food are intimately linked. I wonder how the archives of food can be addressed. That's for Anumitra again.
Yes, this is a complicated question which we always debate among edible archives people, that how to actually because actually food is definitely, caste is a very important in food practices in India, and you cannot not have you cannot not acknowledge this, but what we try to do is that we try to acknowledge that in some way and talk about the source and where it is coming from. That's also what Aparna was saying. I completely agree that if you are learning something from a community, you have to go back to the roots. You have to learn from there, and also you have to acknowledge that. And I think that is one way of doing it. But when it comes to that how we represent it, the representation in the form of representation, I really I don't have, like, when it comes for representation, these are the elements that is part of the whole thing. But I'll give an example which will help me to explain what I want to say. So there is a rice called Radha Tilak, which is from Bengal. As the name of the rice, you can hear that it is a very Hindu upper caste kind of a thing, kind of like the expression that, like, you can only see that this rice is used in the when you are making food for God, or like you're making payasam and all that. But like so I know where it is coming from, because I work with directly with the farmers, and like I have eaten in their house, and I know where like how it is done. But then like I have once paired it with a pork, a Naga pork, which definitely is definitely is breaking all the boundaries. But it doesn't mean that you don't aware and acknowledge all the caste positions.
Thanks.
Also, one more thing I'll tell, that, you know, like we work with, when we try to use up all our waste in within our kitchen. So we also cook a lot with fish innards and fish head. And I think that this is not actually used by very upper caste people, but um, or maybe in some places it does, because I have seen in Bengal it is used in upper caste households also. But in the whole process, there is a way of putting it again in a position where we can tell a story through this.
Another question. We are running out of time, but it's a very quick question. It's from Kevin Fernandez. It says, apart from nostalgia, what are the other ways of engaging with food culture? This is for Shishta. Hello.
Shishta, you're on mute.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So for me, food is not at all about nostalgia. So it is about understanding the traditions, understanding why they have disappeared, and what we can do to bring out of nostalgia into our everyday practice. You know, that working with Mawa, the idea was not at all to go into nostalgia. It was to see how a beautiful food that, you know, doesn't have to be cultivated, doesn't have to be cared for. All you have to do is in season gather it. It's a wild food. How bring these food back into, I mean, I won't use the word mainstream, because that is like saying it is a sort of marginalized food or anything, but take it out of the margins and make it into something which is meaningful for the whole population at a very practical level. So yeah, I think that's my answer.
So is there any way that Shishta and Anumitra can meet and collaborate with each other?
And always, I'm always open for all kinds of collaboration. Up, like, this COVID has put us in a cage where because it can only happen. Food is a tactile thing. You have to go, you have to touch, smell. So
Shishta, do you have any plans to meet Anumitra and collaborate with her?
Why not? I mean, yeah, we could seriously try it out.
yes, we have to meet.
Though I
now.
don't know how it would happen. Yeah, I would love to meet you also.
I'm sure there's a lot of Mawa growing in the forests in and around Goa.
I have not actually encountered.
Yes.
We also have to meet, Suresh.
It's there.
Yes, yes. You're all invited to One Shanti Road to experiment.
Yes, why not?
And all the panelists are waiting to
Yes.
eat your food because we're just talking about food and we're not feeding them anything.
Definitely.
Okay, there is a bit,
Yeah, I would like to
there's
also
a
share
bit of
my views
time,
about that.
so you want to have last words about this conversation, Shishta. What are your future plans? I heard you writing a book, and maybe Anumitra is also doing something very interesting that she wants to share with us.
Uh, can I answer?
Yes, yes, please.
Yeah, so apart from writing the book, my plans are a little vague now because I have health issues which have to, settle down completely before I can work. But I don't know how to. I mean, I can keep putting it out. I keep putting it out on my social media, and if people follow me, they may find out whatever I'm doing. And yeah, that's it. And that's here.
Anumitra, what about you?
I think I have to keep on cooking and learning. That's one thing, but learning is equally important as much as cooking, and making also food around us, which is in abundance, it like mundane things, and bring them into a space of aspiration, because food constantly talks about aspiration. If our only aspiration is pizzas and burgers, then then there is a I don't want to call it a problem, but I also want the other things are like pumpkin flour to be aspiration. I want like mahua to be like aspiration, like so that's one major thing that I want to do through my work.
There are a lot of comments which says that you have to invite them to One Shanti Road. So the invitation is extended on screen. Shishta and Anumitra, you can book your tickets and come and have a break in Shanti Road. And also, I mean, friends in Bangalore can come and meet them. So it's a live event. We'll all invite friends in BIC and MAP to be part of this event.
Absolutely. When things are better and when we can travel, we should keep this conversation on in some ways. 1 hour is not enough.
Yeah, that is how I feel that this conversation could have gone so much longer. And yes, I would also be totally open to when I can travel and things are a little better to come to One Shanti Road and maybe cook and just tell more stories. It would be great fun.
I think we are coming to a close with this conversation, but I'm sure looking at the enthusiasm of both my speakers, Shishta and Anumitra, thank you so much for being part of this session. I've learned a lot of things about ingredients, authenticity, food cultures, and the way it's recorded, interpreted, and also made part of our lives. So it's amazing to talk to both of you. And I hope we continue this conversation beyond this talk and possibly meet physically and eat each other's food. So
Yes,
that is very
Yes,
important to
looking
do.
forward.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you. Bye, Anumitra.
Welcome, welcome.